Hello, friends. Thank you for joining us again for another conversation on leadership and virtues. This is a collaboration of Danielle and Tom Thibodeau, or like I want to say, between Dad and Danny. This is made possible through the expertise and the encouragement of my daughter, Danielle. Today, our virtue is forgiveness. Forgiveness. Love is forgiving. Love, I believe, forgiveness is the most profound expression of love. It's giving up on revenge, it's giving up on retaliation, it's looking for reconciliation and healing. Forgiveness is always about the relationship. Not that you forget a past hurt, not that you deny it at all, but that you embrace it. And in that embracing, reconciliation and possibility reveal themselves. A friend of mine, Larry Long, goes into schools all across the nation, inviting elders in to speak to the children. How much elders have to teach younger people, how good it is for elders to listen to young people, their energy and their enthusiasm, the reconciliation that takes place when generations come together and understand and hear each other out. He was in a school in Alabama when a gentleman came in. He had no baseball glove on, it had no webbing. He had an old bat that was cracked. And he said, "My name is Frank Evans, and I used to be a catcher for the great Satchel Paige." Satchel Paige, maybe the finest pitcher of all time, but we don't know much about him because he pitched in the Negro Leagues. He was Satchel's catcher, and they would play in games all across the South. People came out, black and white, to watch Satchel Paige, but because they were traveling through the South, they were not able to stay in most towns and not able to go into restaurants. So they slept and they ate on the bus, and underneath their seats, they had cases of sardines. Frank Evans said, "I think I lived so long because I ate so many sardines, and that fish oil is good for you." One night after a long tour, he gets into his car and he's driving down a 2-lane road, and he ends up right in the middle of a Ku Klux Klan rally. They grab him out of his car and we're going to lynch him. And then somebody says, "Hey, are you Frank Evans who catches for Satchel Paige?" "Yes, sir, I am." "Let him go. He plays for Satchel." Satchel Paige had that much respect that saved Frank Evans' life. Frank Evans was a spokesperson for justice from that day on. They joined Dr. King on a march. And on one of the marches that they were going through a small town, Dr. King was downed by someone threw a brick out of the crowd. The brick hit Martin up alongside the head and dropped him to his knees. And as he's on his knees and the blood is coming out of his forehead, he looked up at Frank and said, "Bring me that brick. That's a brick of righteousness." And Dr. King grabbed that brick and he said to Frank and everyone around him, "Please put your hand on this brick. This is a brick of righteousness, forgiveness, and reconciliation. This is a gift of peace. Dear God, please change the heart of the person who threw this brick. May they know that they are forgiven, that they too are one of our brothers." At the end of that prayer, the man sheepishly came out of the crowd and got down on his knees and said, "Dr. King, I threw that brick." And King embraced the man. It was a power of reconciliation. We see those same kinds of powers of reconciliation and peace and forgiveness. We saw them in the demonstrations when we remembered George Floyd. We remember that in our difference that we are fellow human beings, and which bridges the difference? It's our acts of forgiveness. But sometimes we've been hurt so deeply, it's difficult to forgive. Dr. Kubler-Ross wrote about death and dying, and other psychologists have picked this up and said you can use those same steps for when you're hurt. For when you're hurt, it's like a death. There's a level in terms of grief. Something is lost when we are rejected. What happens when you're fired? What happens when you're abused? We've experienced some level in terms of trauma. Do we not all need some level of reconciliation and forgiveness? So Dr. Kubler-Ross, the first is denial. See, we want to think that we're so strong and so independent. We don't need anybody or anybody else's help. And so when we get hurt and people say, are you okay? Yes, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine, when really inside we're about ready to disintegrate. When you finally take off the mask and allow yourself to feel it, it's almost devastating. But how many of us live with great levels of denial? How many of us have lived with the denial of racial injustice in this country, economic injustice? How many of us have lived with the denial that women still makes that much more less than men do? The levels in terms of denial to protect ourselves sometimes, that's the first level when we really feel hurt. The second is that once the denial comes down, the anger comes out. And have we not seen that? Pent up anger, sometimes anger of generations, trauma can last for 14 generations. It compounds itself. And when it explodes, there's all kinds of anger. The third level, she says, is that once you get through that angry level, then you start to bargain. Well, if I hadn't said this or I hadn't done that, and maybe this wouldn't have happened. Well, it did happen. But we cannot bargain ourselves out. It's not having to be able to go back and change what's taken in the past. Moreover, it's to accept what is. And when we accept what is, sometimes there's these levels of despair, despondency, and depression. I'm worried right now after the disruptions that we've had this last month, where people had all kinds of energy joined together, asking for justice in this country. Now people return to their own homes and their own apartments. How many younger people have become despondent, disconnected, that the energy that they felt standing up for justice, now they're left with themselves. Now they have to ask themselves, what's next? And what's that next is a level in terms of acceptance. See reality for what it is and accept it. I was hurt, rejected, frustrated, traumatized. This is who I am, but it does not define who I need to be. Forgiveness always demands a level of reflection on who we are and who we hope to become. It's always personal, and it must be dealt with before I can be in healthy relationships with other people. If I am hurt or traumatized, that is the lens in which I see the world. Robert Greenleaf said that healing is one of the cornerstones of servant leadership, and forgiving is healing. A story from our own personal experience. My father divorced my mother after 35 years of marriage. There was some contention within the marriage. My mother suffered from mental illness. She suffered a great deal. And after 35 years, my father just left. He couldn't take it any longer. In a short period of time, my father married another woman who was only 5 years older than myself, and all of us felt betrayed. This man that we had admired, this man who had taken care of us and loved us for a lifetime, was now distant. His new wife felt that his children were in competition with her for his affection. And so she did not allow us to see him. My children growing up had Christmas with their grandfather at a Denny's. Very difficult to celebrate Christmas at Denny's, no matter how cheerful or intentional you would like to be. My father was separated from his second wife, and he was living on it by himself. And during that time, he has a stroke after surgery, and we take him in. We brought him to our La Crosse, where 4 of my brothers and sisters were living so that we could care for him more immediately. And now he became so sweet. He was so dependent upon us. We would go for walks and hold hands. We'd sit on the porch and swing. Come and watch the football on Monday nights. And they'd bring popcorn and beer, root beer. We'd sit on the couch and hold hands, kiss each other goodnight. It was sweet. He was a little boy. He was a child. I became the parent. I grew up. But when I think about those lost years in which we were not able to celebrate, to be present to him, I would become angry and bitter, and the sweetness would disappear. And I came to the realization I could hold on to one, but not the other. If I wanted to hold on to the sweetness, the kindness, the love, the bitterness had to be let go of. But if I wanted to hold on to the bitterness and the anger of the past, the kindness and sweetness disappeared. This is a choice that forgiveness gives all of us. What will we hold on to? What will we let go of? Forgiveness. It's the cornerstone of all relationships. It's significant in being a leader, a teacher, a friend, a parent, a grandparent, a spouse, a human being. Love is forgiving. Thank you for your time. Good talking to you. Look forward to speaking with you again.